say play ball?
Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Woo! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to the Star Wars Underworld Podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion each and every week. And this week on the show, we will be crunching the numbers on the Acolyte and trying to figure out why it was canceled. Plus, a new Bad Batch book, film updates, and more. And stay tuned till the end as we answer your hashtag Ask the SWU questions. All that and much more on the show. My name is Chris, and joining me is my good friend, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, Hannah. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I was told there would be no math. I was under the impression that being a Star Wars fan, doing podcasts like this meant that I didn't need to know math. I stopped paying attention to math a long time ago. I can't tell you what X equals. I can't tell you what Y equals. I don't know. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I know that. And I'm sure that will be very, very helpful as we crunch the numbers here to understand why this TV show that we liked didn't get a second season. By the way, for everybody who doesn't watch the video version of it, you missed Ben making a terrific crunching face when Chris said crunch the numbers during the intro. So you gotta, this is what you tune in live for, folks. Anyway, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a good show.
Heck yes. Pythagoras is very happy that you remembered his theorem after all these years. Also joining us, it's Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Good to be back. And let me get my calculator out. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But I think crunch, there'll be more than numbers to crunch tonight when it comes to the Acolyte and the fallout from that show. And I'll be honest, we're just don't come here. I know, like, I hype it up online. I'm like, we're gonna answer these questions. We're not. We're just a bunch of idiots trying to figure this crap out. Like, it's just, don't come to us looking for actual answers, because you're gonna probably be disappointed. I'm sorry, but we'll do our best.
Every time we say crunch the numbers, I think of that scene in The Office when they've started the Michael Scott paper company. And they realize they've gone broke. And Pam says to the accountant guy, "Can you crunch them again?" And the guy goes, "I can't. That's just in the computer. That's how it goes. Give it a try." And he just sort of presses one key on his keyboard and goes crunch. I feel like that's what we're gonna do here.
Yep.
That was the equivalent of us pressing the go live button. Was us going crunch.
Oh my goodness.
Like that.
I just found this out this week, guys. Do you know that your calculator can also make phone calls and go on Blue Sky? I just found this out.
What? Wait a minute.
What? What are you saying?
I think Dom missed me holding it up. This is my calculator. I can make phone calls with it. I just learned that.
What are you saying? What is the bit? You've got 1138 in a calculator and you're claiming it's a phone. What are you saying to us right now? Wow.
Yeah, I accidentally hit something. It just dialed somebody up. I thought it was just a tool for math all this time.
Yeah. No, this thing does other things. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That out. So, but
I've really missed this for the past 2 weeks. really missed this.
I can do the math.
Oh man.
But if you can't do the math, make sure you get out of the equation. If anyone gets that reference, you are old. You are now old if you get that reference. I'm sorry.
What's that even? Wait, that's a reference to something? I thought that was just a bad pun.
No, that is a reference.
Oh, okay.
Like, that is that is a song lyric from like 2004.
Sure.
That other voice you hear over there, it is at the Raeside.
G'day there. Great to be back in business. Like I said, really missed this beautiful, beautiful banter we have here. Can't wait to get into it. I will preface, I just want to get this off my chest first of all. We're going into a period where, apart from Celebration and Andor eventually coming up, we're going to have a lot of quiet weeks, I think, through the year for Star Wars. And one of those weeks, I want to set aside a show where we spend a whole entire hour dissecting and analyzing why does Chris emphasize the is in his intro catchphrase? Why is it is nostalgic? Who has threatened you in the past, Chris, that maybe you're lying, maybe you're claiming it isn't? I don't want to know now, though. I want to know another time. I want like a full analysis.
Question, not today.
Oh my gosh. See now I'm just gonna be like antsy until I get the answer.
Okay, what is it? There's an actual answer?
Yes, there's a very specific answer to that. Which is
okay.
So it goes back to a Star Wars fan.
Oh jeez.
Like 15 years ago.
The abridged version. Brother, like two sentences max, champ. What are you doing?
The universe was born 75 million years ago.
I woke up when I was 7.
About 15 years ago, a Star Wars fan was really, really mad that they brought mall packaging back, because they wanted the Star Wars action figures to stay in the 1970s style packaging, because they like the look at that. Because they grew up with that, and so they were nostalgic for that. And I replied that I was completely fine with the mall packaging coming back, because mall packaging is nostalgic for me. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's,
you had to understand the culture at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, roasted. Yeah. You have to understand the culture of the time. What are you, nerd?
Yes,
bunch of nerds.
Understand the culture.
Yeah, the culture of the time.
I mean, okay, it goes back to the origins of the Star Wars Underworld podcast, where we were being countercultural by liking the prequels and having the prequels be something that was
Isn't that crazy that was a counterculture at one point?
Yes.
Oh, crazy. Life.
All these years later, I feel I can finally say this. That 2011 mall packaging is kind of shit. It's not good.
3D glasses.
It's not good.
It had 3D glasses built into it. It was an ingenious functioning.
It's not good though. It's not good. I have no nostalgia for the 80s. But the vintage figure packaging, way better.
Well, there's a reason why our one of our original StarWarsUnderworld.com websites was modeled after a vintage package, because that is a very classic Star Wars design. But certainly not something I'm nostalgic for, as I was not alive when that was in stores.
Yeah.
It's true.
Facts.
All right, let's do some promos.
Anyway,
do we want to break down Ben's intro about how he brags about how he has so many friends? Is that what we want to do next? Is that next?
No.
No. Yeah.
There's not a single person who wants to hear that.
No, but the way you say it, like your delivery with it, Ben, is what's so interesting about that comment, because you say it very exasperatedly, being like, "I've got so many."
You mean
great
I'm feeling right now,
like
exasperated? Does this sound exasperated enough
fascinating.
for you?
It's fascinating, man.
Is that the feeling you're supposed to have when you talk about your friends? Exasperated? I don't know if that's.
I met so many great friends.
Oh,
It's like, what
defend this 10 years later?
Why are you tired of them?
That's so exhausting.
Anyway. Get into my process of how I was feeling at the time when I performed those lines.
Go back to your root beer. Come on, brother.
Fun fact about Ben's read in the intro is it's actually 2 separate takes, because he couldn't say it all at once without laughing. It was
laughing.
A couple of different takes. Yeah.
So good.
Pretty spectacular.
Dang. All right, let's punch those promos and punch the subscribe button, Chewy. if you're watching on anything that lets you subscribe, please watch. Dominic.
I don't
Why?
know.
It's just like a
Something's
weird
funny.
delivery. I don't know why that was so odd.
All right. You can also super chat with us. We'll get your super chats in the SWU segment, and you can become a channel member. And make sure that you also check out our Discord. The link is in the description. Have we decided on what the next movie is going to be? I heard some rumors about what it might be for movie night, Ben.
I don't know. I don't know if I can confirm that just yet. I know
Something's in the works.
Land Before Time went off without a hitch. There was we saw. I'd never seen that movie before, so that was really interesting. And then we're going to do a game night tomorrow night. So look forward to that.
I can't watch the movie again because I don't want to cry because that movie.
I was about to say the same thing. I'm like, I can't delve that deep, like emotionally, like right now. Like that's horrible. It's a super sad movie.
like I can watch the like knockoff of it, Dinosaur, because that's not as emotionally moving as Land Before Time. I just don't connect to the dinosaur character.
Zero thought is the title Dinosaur. I love that. Yeah, it's so good. Dinosaur.
Yeah, that's like
So
a
good.
forgotten. I don't even know who made that. Was it Disney? It's one of the forgotten movies of the forgotten era of movies. Like when Meet the Robinsons and like things came out that people didn't really remember, but I do. I was there.
You have big Meet the Robinsons energy, by the way. You definitely like that's you. What's the other one? Robots. Oh man.
Yes.
Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor.
So good. Yeah.
Yes.
That's what he's most famous for. That's why he goes to conventions.
Yes.
That
To
movie
sign.
has a great soundtrack. Amazing soundtrack.
Great movie.
Amazing. You can also follow us on social media at the SWU. Make sure to follow us on Blue Sky. Just every day, more people join Blue Sky. So we're over there. We're ready. We're waiting for you.
It's the only social media that matters.
That's right. And then also check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network. We got the Raeside on Canon Tales from Beyond the Galaxy Tractor Beam and more.
Okay, Count Dracula. More.
Yes.
The podcast. Do podcast. Great.
Okay, let's dive into the news here. And we're going to talk about the story we put off talking about last week, which is this report that circulated last week that claimed that The Acolyte was the second most viewed series on Disney Plus in 2024. It was viewed for over 2.7 billion minutes. And despite these numbers, still wound up being canceled by Disney. For those that are wondering, the most watched show of 2024 on Disney Plus was Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which came in with about 3 billion minutes watched. I'll throw this out there. Whoever wants to tackle this first, what do we think of this report and the fact that this show seemingly was a relative success when it comes to viewership in 2024? And yet will not be returning ever again, probably. Who wants to take a stab at explaining that one?
Well, I kind of started to do this at the end of the show last week, so I'll reopen that conversation. I don't think it really has anything to do with how successful the show was or how many views the show had. I think it has to do with how expensive the show was. So right now I'm reading 22.5 million per episode is an estimate I'm getting right now off Google. I mean, Andor was 20, so it was more expensive than Andor and more expensive than Ahsoka, which was 15 million per episode. There's not that many shows that were more than that. So it was one of the most expensive shows. Hawkeye was 25 million, Miss Marvel 25 million. So it looks like the Marvel shows were the most expensive. Secret Invasion 35 million. Ouch. So it was, I believe, the most expensive Star Wars show per episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why. That's entirely why. Like, they, with that budget. Now, here's the thing. I don't think they intended that to be the budget. I think there were a lot of reports that were coming out that the show went over budget. So, but basically, as they probably had a sunk cost thing where they're like, we've already spent so much on the show, we have to put it out and get our money back. I don't think they wanted the PR of doing what they did to Willow to a Star Wars show. So I think they needed to get it out. They needed to finish it, so they had to pay the extra money. But the issue is when you get to that point of expense, the show has to be, it can't just be your second biggest show of the year. It has to be your biggest show by a mile. It has to blow away all the numbers that all the other Star Wars shows did, because it was more expensive than all the other Star Wars shows per episode. So I really think that's my take on what happened is, like, because of the situation of them underestimating the budget initially and how much expensive it would be to shoot that script that they had put together, it became basically an untenable situation, where in order for the show to continue, they would have had to reach new heights of what Star Wars is capable of doing and pulling numbers in, which was very unfair to put on a show that was very experimental. And honestly, I think is pretty amazing that it was the second most viewed show of the year for the streaming service. Like, that I think that's more than anyone could have expected. But just the budget, it just made it impossible. So that's my opinion. It's the budget. That's the reason.
It's the budget, yeah. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is the budget's the big thing. It's second in the year, but I think that number is a little bit misleading because it's still significantly lower in viewership than the other Star Wars shows. Mandalorian is a bona fide cultural phenomenon, big hit. Every episode is top 3 every week that it's out. Ahsoka, Andor, Book of Boba, Obi-Wan, they all kind of float somewhere in between the two, where Acolyte is good for what it is, but not great. Mando is great. Those other ones sort of float somewhere in between. And so while we can say, yes, it was second and that you would like to think that would be enough, it's, second place. Not all second places are created equal. And, I was trying desperately to think of a analogy for this and one that wasn't sport related, but all I could think of was it's like the entry draft, right? You get the first overall pick, you get the second overall pick. Some years you get a genuine bona fide superstar. Some years you get a journeyman player. Some years it's a total bust. And while getting second is an accomplishment in and of itself, and like that's not something to sneer at because enough people did tune in, it doesn't mean that you're going to set world records. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get another chance at this. So second is a bit misleading, even though I would like to think that it would be enough. Ben, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, no, I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know. I wasn't really joking off the top because I'm genuinely just like this stuff genuinely confuses me. I'm not good at crunching the numbers, as they say. But I know there's a lot of information out there. I mean, there was the information that recently came out in the past couple of days that Disney Plus lost a ton of subscribers within the past few months. That's probably affecting things. And then, I'm reading another report that's right in front of me that says that Bluey was one of the biggest streaming shows of the entire year with 55.62 billion minutes viewed. That's so huge and so much bigger than what we're talking about right here. And so like it's just crazy what all this goes into. And I think ultimately it's way more nuanced and way more complicated and way deeper than I think any of us really wanted it to be. I think I saw a lot of opinions online. I saw a lot of opinions of Blue Sky, okay? Because I read your comments, guys. And, a lot of people just being like, going like, "Ah, we know you canceled the Acolyte because of the bigots. We know you," and like that kind of like people feeling like this was the smoking gun. This was the final thing. I'm just like, well, it was the biggest show, the second biggest show on Disney Plus. Of course, that's the reason. And I sympathize with those people. I don't necessarily disagree that it didn't have a part in it. Like, the hate campaign was huge. It started way before the show came out. And I think it played a part in this, whether you can come at from the angle of, well, you know, it affected Disney in a way that they saw the comments and they saw the backlash, the quote unquote backlash, and said, okay, people don't like this. But you also can't rule out that like all the bad will just grew and grew and grew to the point where people were just like, I heard that show was bad, I'm not going to watch it. And then that transforms into just lower viewership. You can't have that much just hate, like pure hate towards anything, and not have some type of effect. We know it had a psychological effect on the cast because they talked about how it affected them. And it's horrible. But I think you can't also, like Chris is saying, like, the budget was inflated. It was not great. And then the viewership maybe wasn't what it could have been. There's all, you know, ultimately could just be a little bit of everything. Could just be a little bit of all these things. And I can't remember the last Disney board meeting I was in. So I can't tell you with sound credibility as to what actually happened behind closed doors and what was actually said. And we arguably probably will never know. So, you know, it's again, you know, we're not going to be satisfied by any of this. I think a lot of people are going to go to the answer that makes the most sense to them and go like, that's the reason why. Ultimately, it sucks because whether you like the Acolyte or dislike the Acolyte, I think it's a show I think we all, even everyone in good faith at least, wanted to see it continue, wanted to see it where it went. And we may not get that for at least a long while.
Hannah, what do you think?
I agree with the sentiment that you said there, Ben, of I think there's a lot of factors. I don't really put my answer into one field. I think the money thing is a big part of it. And if, you know, you're part of Disney's board, you're not going, how meaningful were these characters? You're going, how much did this cost? How much did we make? That's what they're looking at. But then on the other side, there's also, I think a lot of feedback does go into decisions, fan feedback. And I think this is the first time that we've probably seen the most direct correlation between fan reaction, whether it be in good faith or not, whether it be insane or not, like just taking the reactions at face value. And it doesn't matter whether it was fair. It was like the most negative experience for all. And even someone who I enjoyed a lot, like quite a few parts of Acolyte, but it's not my favorite Star Wars thing. But, you know, I was quite critical of it. I think it was just so taxing of a time just because of the effect it had on everything. And yeah, I think there's a big argument of how fair that intensity was. But coming from a corporate standpoint, that's taking away from so much of Star Wars fans, which I think they've already been fairly aware that is being on the not on the edge, but just that are ready to pounce at things being bad. So I think yeah, it's just a big combination of everything. When you list all those things, it's the most expensive thing ever. You can't really hear the people that are liking it because the negative reaction and cloud and like dark side shroud that just enclosed this show was so large and intense. You know, I just think it unfortunately was a logical decision for them. Regardless of my personal opinion, I think it was a logical decision for Disney. putting my own personal spin on it though as well, my personal standpoint on it, it's interesting. As much as there is a lot of elements of the show that I enjoy, but I personally think it doesn't fit with Star Wars storytelling right now. I wonder if this story told 5 years ago or 5 years in the future would work better. But I think because I'm in the mindset of Mandoverse, we got the Mando Grogu movie coming up. We just had Ahsoka that was really exciting. Even the Andor era, like this kind of era, is very specific, and I think they're trying to fine tune that now, especially with seeing how they're going forward. I always struggle and still struggle to be like, oh, okay, hang on, we're 100 years before. Like, I didn't enjoy flipping back like that. So it's like there was good things, but like I'm not invested in seeing more of that story because I just feel like it's too just disjointed right now. I think they could revisit something of this era and of these characters eventually, maybe. But again, corporate-wise, business-wise, personal opinion aside, I think it was the logical decision from Disney. That's my take.
It's kind of, the cancellation is kind of death by 1,000 cuts. I don't think there's one specific reason. I think it's a whole bunch of things that we've hit on here. Budget, viewership, response. Maybe they want a more specific vision for what Star Wars is, and kind of they want more momentum to the storytelling than you get when you jump around. And I think all of that leads to the decision that's made. And I think all of that, including the negative and positive reactions to the show, just sort of, at the end of the day, it wasn't popular enough. For whatever reason, it wasn't popular enough to justify its cost. And you can complain about that. You can be upset about that. And it's fair to be that way. But ultimately, as much as we want to talk about this as all being about the art and the final product and the the vision for Disney, they're a corporation. All they care about is money. It's the dollars and cents. And that's where we're left with. And it's unfortunate. And it's especially unfortunate considering, Star Wars for a long time was one crazy guy's vision. And he would pump all of his money into it and say, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm making my show. You really think Clone Wars under Disney would have survived the first movie? I think it would have survived the first 10 episodes of season 1. No way. There's no way in hell. That show would have been canceled long before that. But think about all the stuff that we got later on down the line. And so that's when you are that's what you're losing when you have stuff made as part of the machine, the Hollywood machine, as opposed to one crazy guy. And there aren't that many crazy guys doing what George did. Anyway, so that's that. That's the Acolyte. Have we answered it? Did we crunch the numbers? Did we do it? Did we solve it? I think we did.
We crunched them.
We crunched them.
We crushed the numbers.
We crushed them. Let's move on. Let's talk about something a little bit more exciting. We've got a new announcement of a Bad Batch novel. This was announced this week. Star Wars Sanctuary was announced by Lucasfilm and Penguin Random House, I think, is who is the publisher for this one. Right. Written by Lamar Giles and set during the events of season 2. Features the Bad Batch working with Fee to rebuild Pabu after the tsunami. Oh boy. Now there's the story I've wanted to hear for the Bad Batch. I think this is, I think the way to look at this is it's a lost episode. When rumors started to swirl that there was a Bad Batch novel in the works, I'm like, what's my dream version of this? And it's the continuation of the show. It's set something somewhere after season 3, maybe even after the epilogue of the finale. But of course it was always going to be something that was sort of just an unseen adventure. But still, it will be fun to revisit these characters. How do we feel about this? A Bad Batch novel announced.
Phenomenal. My question is, why don't you announce this when season 3 ends and release it a couple months later? Why do it now? Like, again, just like capitalize on people being engaged. It's insane. But yeah, I think there's merit to what you said, Dom. I think this is probably a story that was maybe one of the cut storylines that was going to make it into the show. But again, it's just like, I think the talk and the positive like approach to Bad Batch and people being like, okay, this isn't like, our 7 seasons of Clone Wars, but this was a really great story, really great characters. Like there was this real kind of Bad Batch feeling at the end of season 3. But that's now over a year ago. And they're mentioning it now. I'm like, oh, dude, just mention this straight away. Oh my word! But very exciting, regardless. I'm really excited to pick this one up. I think it's going to be good.
I think the thing here is like that feeling that you're talking about, Hannah. I think that's like what created this novel, because no other Star Wars show has gotten a book like this. Like where's all my Mandalorian novels? Where's an Andor story? Where's where's the Obi-Wan Kenobi tie-in books? Like they don't exist. But the excitement that exists around that show, and the fandom that still exists around it, I think that creates something like this, because Lucasfilm sees that and they go, oh, people want more from these characters. Great. All right, let's so somebody call up the right. Let's get some authors in here and see what pitches they have and do a story like that.
Which is probably where one of my biggest gripes with Star Wars right now lies, because that seems so logical to me. Like, imagine Skeleton Crew ends, right? And then announced coming at Star Wars Celebration exclusive, the tales of John Narwood, or whatever the hell his name was. And it's like his backstory as a novel. Everyone's going to be like, oh, that guy, yeah, and pick that up. Same thing with every show, like we said there. Like, oh, man, there's so many questions in the live action shows, even with Kenobi. You could just do an Inquisitor book. You could do, a bunch of other tie-ins for so many characters of each of these shows. It's crazy that they're not trying to capitalize on that more. I don't know.
But it is this. I think it's the same reason that we're just now starting to get a lot of sequel trilogy stuff. Tie-ins, not on both ends. We're getting stuff kind of in the trilogy. We're getting stuff before, leading into. It's because, like, during the time when these things are in production, they don't want to give up any of this stuff. They don't want to give up any story ideas they might think. Like, if this really is a lost episode, they're like, well, we're in production of the show, we might use this. We're not going to use this. Then when the show ends, they're like, oh, now we can actually use this and turn it into a book or something like that. So I think that's why I think, it is interesting. And it just sucks because I think we got a lot of great tie-in novel stuff with the movies and with the shows. Not as much with the shows, but like I'm thinking back to Catalyst, the Rogue One novel. That was a great one. There's been a lot of great ones, and I know there's a lot of I'm sure having to nail all this stuff down and have it come out in a certain sequence is probably a massive headache for the people that are in charge of this stuff and trying to make it happen. I'm sure it is, but it's highly satisfying to read a novel. Like, take Catalyst. Like, that was fun. Like, reading Catalyst before Rogue One, getting a read on those characters, quite literally, before going in and watching Rogue One. It was a lot of fun, and I wish they would do it more. And yeah, it is pure insanity that they're like, where's we almost got a Mandalorian novel. Where the hell is that? Like, it's just it's insane.
Yeah. And even because this used to be the way they did things. Like you said, Ben, there were tie-in novels for each of the movies. You go back to the Clone Wars. People forget this. There were a series of Clone Wars tie-in novels that Karen Travis and Karen Miller, I think, wrote that were like continuations of the series that sort of came out in and around seasons 1 and 2. This used to be like a big part of it, and they've just, for whatever reason, they've shifted away from that. I think because they are much more worried about continuity now, and any little like changes to the canon will, they create ripples, and therefore they're afraid to do these books. But I think they're also afraid of closing off storylines for whatever reason. And so they're like, I don't think we can do that. Like the Mandalorian book, the novel, from like the little like hints and that sort of thing that are out there about why that didn't happen, it sounds to me like they made a whole bunch of changes for season 3 and it completely shotgunned the story of the book. Like it was just like that, we can't do that anymore. And so I wonder if like they're afraid of doing that again, and therefore you wait until the series is done to go in and do episode 7.5 of the Bad Batch season 2 and say, everybody enjoy this story now, a year later, when you're missing those characters because they're not on your screen every week anymore. But it would be fun for there to have been all of these stories that were coming out at the same time. I'm still waiting for that grand multimedia storytelling experience that combines movies, books, comics, TV shows, all of this into one thing that's moving towards a final destination. They seem to not be interested in doing that, even though that seemed to be the idea way back in the day in 2015 when all this was starting out. So anyway, I'm excited to read the book. No matter, regardless, it's be fun to spend more time with Hunter and Wrecker and Tech and Omega and Crosshair.
More tech content. It's
true.
Yes,
it's true. When he was at his
Tech
most
lives,
annoying.
asterisk.
There's a big asterisk on that one. All right. Let's keep moving here. A little bit of celebration news. Rosario Dawson, John Knoll, Oscar Isaac, and Ahmed Best will all be there. Don't read anything into that. They're just going to go there to sign autographs. Doesn't mean we're getting a movie starring Ahsoka, Poe, and Jar Jar. Seems unlikely, but be nice to have them there. Always welcome. We talked last week about George Nolfi taking over the writing of the new Jedi Order screenplay. He actually has spoken a little bit about it since then in the Film Stories magazine. This is what he said. He said, quote, the way I approach it is the way I approach it is you look at what's come before you. You look at the broad ideas of what they want to do, meaning Lucasfilm, Disney, Sharmini Obaid-Chinoy, the director, and then you do what a writer does and try and put beats of a story together. Try and imagine characters, and then you present that with an understanding that it needs to honor an obviously long and incredible tradition. He also talked about how he, was, studying the Star Wars long before he was ever going to write a story. He's like, quote, if you think about George Lucas, the 6 movies that he did and the universe he created, it's actually very steeped in broad notions of politics. It's not talking about today per se, but there's the empire's Nazism / Roman Empire, the democracy of the Roman Empire collapsing and becoming an empire. Boy, he says empire a lot. And the perennial story of human beings organizing themselves against chaos. And then the tools that help human society tamp down on chaos becomes oppression. So that is really what really core to what I think George Lucas was trying to talk about. And one of the wonderful things about science fiction and Star Wars, which is almost like science fantasy or space opera, is that you can raise the deepest issues without it feeling like a philosophy class or a political science class or something that I read in the newspaper today. It can be about real deep things. What do we think about what Mr. Nolfi has to say? Benjamin, start us off.
I mean, this guy gets it. I mean, he gets the Star Wars, which, I mean, I should expect nothing less from a guy that's writing a Star Wars movie. But it is very nice and refreshing to hear someone talk so intimately about it, because we don't really get this all that much. I don't think we get a lot of the philosophy behind Star Wars from the people from making it. Like, we've heard Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau talk ad nauseum about it, but like they talk about everything. Like, it's nice to hear people that are less in the spotlight, like that are actually like making something that will really shape the franchise. I think going forward, I think this movie really has the potential to do that. It has the potential to be really huge for the future of Star Wars. Like, quite literally, it's the most, the farthest in the future in the timeline, as they say. So like, that's really interesting. And so it's really cool to get that, because and also just talking about the real world influences that are obvious in a time when there are many people on certain places on the internet that would deny that there are certain very obligatory political and cultural influences on Star Wars that George Lucas has been very clear about. And this guy understands that. I think that's the bare minimum someone should have before writing a Star Wars film.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Chris, Hannah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I've been saying this for years. I mean, that the best thing about sci-fi is that it can speak to today's issues in a detached futuristic setting, so you can process it differently without feeling like it's a lecture. And I think fantasy, because Star Wars bridges that gap between sci-fi and fantasy, is very much about the philosophy of archetypes and, individual development. And so I think Star Wars very much brings those two things together, that social philosophy from science fiction and that personal psychological philosophy from fantasy.
Absolutely. Hannah, any thoughts?
I agree.
Like,
yeah, all that. But yeah, no, I think this is a very succinct analysis of just what Star Wars is and what Star Wars should be. And it sounds good. It sounds good, someone talking about it like this. But again, I'm getting so lost with who's writing who. I feel like every week they're just deciding on someone else. So yeah, it's nice. And it'll be interesting to see if this writer goes ahead with something Star Wars, because that'll be great, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if somebody could finish a script. That would be good. That'd be nice if they could get one finished and start shooting. That'd be terrific. Okay. Some sad news this week. Gary Fisher. He was the dog and companion to the late Carrie Fisher. He passed away this week. His new owners shared the news on Instagram. It's always sad when a dog dies, but Gary was, I think, Star Wars fandom's dog. Like, he was like our collective dog.
Oh yeah,
everybody kind of adored him with his dopey tongue always sticking out of his mouth, but also just the way the way he sort of you would see him with Carrie towards the end of her life, and you could tell there was a real deep bond between the two of them. And Carrie's assistant, who kind of took in Gary after she died and then took over the Instagram account, I think understood that and kept that spirit alive through the rest of Gary's life. So good dog. That's all I got.
Yeah, I did a deep dive into just the history and all the photos and stuff like that. This thing is just some amazing stuff in there. Just putting in Gary Fisher dog into Google and just looking at what comes up is astounding. Just all the red carpet photos, this just weird looking dog, and I mean this in the best way possible. Gary, Ray, rest in peace. He's a weird looking dog, and he's just surrounded by photographers, all of them trying to get the like this is Beyonce or something on the red carpets. It's amazing, and all the celebrities that held him and were in his company. Just huge loss, because he was for so many years he was as much a part of the Star Wars family as any actor or anybody else was.
Yeah. You, Ben, you posted the terrific video of him protecting Carrie from Warwick Davis on stage at Star Wars Celebration. If you haven't seen it, it's tremendous. Warwick is trying to reenact the scene from Return of the Jedi when Wicket finds Leia. So he's got an Ewok, like, not Ewok hat on, but like a little thing hat, I guess. Let's call it a hat, and a big giant spear. And Gary saw this and in his dog mind went, danger, and started trying to protect Carrie, which was absolutely adorable and hysterical.
So good.
All right. And on that sad note, let's move into our Ask the SWU segment. This is where we turn things over to our listeners, to you, the listener, and we'll answer some of your questions, mainly submitted via our Discord. Skywalker's Academy helping me out in the live chat. It was a hood. He was wearing an Ewok hood. I couldn't think of the word for hood.
Nailed it.
Right.
Yeah, there you All right, let's we'll start with one here from the Discord. This comes from Gilster10. Gilster10 says, since Palpatine wasn't fully designed until 1978-79, do you think Davros, the creator of the Daleks from Doctor Who, helped inspire his design? I know Palpatine was inspired by Death from the Seventh Seal and the Emperor from Frank Herbert's Dune, who we know George Lucas is a fan of Doctor Who, and both franchises shared the same cast and crew to help build the case. Davros' first appearance was in 1975, and he's made countless appearances in Doctor Who since then. While Davros' design and mannerisms in the modern series are clearly inspired by Palpatine to the point of destroying reality, I can't shake the coincidence that even Palpatine's corpse-like appearance in The Rise of Skywalker resembles Davros. What do you guys think? Palpatine, Davros?
I feel like the relationship between like Star Wars and Doctor Who and Dune is kind of similar to the relationship between like the Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. Like they were kind of developed amongst the same like group of people who knew each other and were referencing each other. Sometimes it's hard to pick out what idea comes from what.
Yeah, I mean the what was I saying? The Doctor Who, like the British crew who worked on the original Star Wars movies, like there's a lot of crossover. Like these are guys who make science fiction things. They're going to work on the big science fiction stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was some influence, but Dune is much more the direct influence, right? Like that's, Dune comes out about 12 years before Star Wars, and you can definitely tell George read that book and took a lot from it and put his own spin on it, but there's a lot of things like that. So
and George was very open about that. It's not like he's like, oh, a planet with sand and spice, I came up with that all on my own, wink wink. Like George has never been like that. Like he was pretty honest. He's lied about other things, but he's been pretty honest about that. So like, it is it is interesting, and I think like you take Doctor Who, like I think there's a lot of crossover there. Like there's countless actors that have been in both things. There's plenty of information about that and a lot of creative stuff. But like, yeah, I think Davros. I think it could also be the other way around too. Because there has been different iterations of these characters, and I know I watched some Capaldi stuff years ago, and Davros showed up in that and stuff like that. And so like these are characters that Doctor Who and Star Wars are both franchises that just continue to go along, and these characters keep popping up. And ultimately Palpatine and Davros are just really weird old dudes, sometimes sitting in chairs saying weird evil stuff, and and they're just very evil. And I think that's just like, oh yeah, gray skin, lots of wrinkles, stuff like that. That's the general vibe. So there's not a lot of like people just go a certain way. There is a lot of parallel thought there, I think.
I like your description of Palpatine as an old dude sitting in a chair. That's the Emperor.
Yeah, that's
of the
pretty
universe.
much it.
Just a guy sits in a chair, hangs out. There you go.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Sometimes
shoot some lightning. I unfortunately cannot speak to any of this whole conversation because I don't know any of the characters you've even mentioned here. So what have they said? Whatever they said.
Davros, he invented the Daleks or something in Doctor Who.
Oh, pretty smart guy then. He crunched the numbers. That's what he did. He crunched the numbers and figured out how to invent them. Boom.
There you go. Thank you, Gilster10, for the question. We'll move on to the next one here. This one comes from Jill Davis, host of Ion Cannon. Speaking of Ion Cannon, I was on Ion Cannon. I had my Ion Cannon this week, and we talked about. Ostensibly we were there to talk about Skeleton Crew. We wound up having a much more interesting conversation about Revenge of the Sith and why Anakin doesn't have a red lightsaber in that movie, which I know sounds like a boring nerd conversation, but I think was actually really interesting. Joel says this. He says, "Hello, Underworld. My question for you on this podcast is, since most of you are more or less close to my age, did you ever read the Dark Horse Star Wars Republics comics from 2003 to 2005 by John Ostrander? These comics were essentially the Clone Wars show before the Clone Wars show debuted in 2008. It was such a fun experience reading these books growing up because it felt like experiencing the Clone Wars in real time before Revenge of the Sith was released. In fact, many of the story arcs from the comics were later adapted in a loose way into the 2008 show, such as Dark Disciple, which is based on Quinlan Voss's arc from the comics. Here's my controversial take. I think these comics do a better job of depicting the Clone Wars than the 2008 cartoon. They present a more grim and gritty portrayal of the war with hollow victories, crushing defeats, and a clear depiction of the Republic's slide into fascism. My second hot take is that the tone of these comics fit the prequels better than the 2008 cartoons, which sometimes feels like a soft reboot, especially with things like Anakin's characterization and the retroactive addition of a Padawan. That said, I still love Ahsoka. So, did you read these comics as a kid? If so, what memories do you have of them? This is the part of the show where those of us who aren't named Chris all get to sit back and listen to Chris talk about these comics, because I know for a fact from having done the show with you for 13 plus years that you love these friggin' books and you have a lot to say about them. So I will, in fact, I'll just go ahead and mute my microphone, and the floor is yours.
Joel must have not been around for the episode where I answered a question about like my favorite Star Wars comic book series and said it was this series. So I have already said why I like it, but there's a visual for you guys as well.
There you go.
So there's Quinlan Voss. Yes, I'm gonna narrate. This is Quinlan Voss in the comic book version, not the Clone Wars version or the Phantom Menace version, but the version from the Republic comic books. And yes, Jan Duursema and John Ostrander are some of the greatest ever creative people to make Star Wars comics. Absolutely incredible stuff.
Yeah. Do you agree that they are a better depiction of the Clone War than the show, and that they're more in line with the prequels than the show?
Well, they're more in line with Revenge of the Sith just by nature of chronology of when things were made. So I would say that the Clone Wars show is a very good spin-off of the first two prequels. In fact, I had a moment where I, after watching, I think it was like maybe season 5 or maybe the Lost Missions of the Clone Wars, I went back and I watched Attack the Clones for the first time in like a year or two, and I was like, dang, like this is basically like a Clone Wars episode. This is like a prequel to the Clone Wars. It fits really, really well. It gave me a little bit of a different take on that movie. So as far as the first two prequels go, I don't really think it matters if the Republic comic books or Clone Wars. I think they're both equally good at being a sequel to those first two. But as far as how it ties into Revenge of the Sith, despite them attempting with Siege of Mandalore to do their best to kind of clean the canon up, I mean, it was basically like explaining away how everything fits together. And I think they did a pretty decent job of it. Of course, when you do go and sit down and watch Revenge of the Sith, it just sounds really weird. You basically have to do a super cut of watching Siege of Mandalore cut into Revenge of the Sith for it to make sense as a sequel to the Clone Wars. Otherwise, it makes no sense as a sequel to the Clone Wars. Whereas the comic books, of course, that fits better. Like Revenge of the Sith is a good sequel to the Republic comics, to the point where you literally have that line about Master Vos moving his troops to Baz Pity, which is a line to talk about, reference the Republic comic books and the character from that. Because I think if it weren't for those comic books, I don't think George Lucas would have just randomly referenced someone who's in the background of shot in Phantom Menace. That doesn't make sense to name a character unless he had a bigger role in Star Wars. But I will say that the Clone Wars pulled a lot of stuff out of the Republic comics, and I was glad that they did. Like, I was glad that they brought Quinlan Voss in. I was glad that they brought there was more of Aurra Sing and Aayla Secura, which were two very big characters in the comic books. However, as you all know, it is my pet peeve that they took half of Aurra Singh's character and then transplanted it onto Asajj Ventress. Because, like, you already had two really great characters in Asajj Ventress, the Acolyte Sith, and Aurra Singh, the Force-sensitive bounty hunter. And I thought both of those characters were really great in the Micro series and the Republic comics, respectively. So I felt like to then reduce Aurra Singh to just another one of the bounty hunters to maybe a similar role as like a Cad Bane character, and then to take a lot of that interesting Force-sensitive rogue story and then give it to Asajj Ventress instead. I thought that kind of does a disservice to the continuity of the characters. I felt like they should have just continued that. And again, the reasoning I heard behind it was people for some reason thought that if there was two bald, white-headed women with Force powers, people would confuse them. Like that's the reasoning I heard for it, which I'm like, that it's like
I don't know. People look at me and they look at people look at me and they look at Dwayne at Vin Diesel at the same time. And they're like, same guy.
Yeah, exactly.
You bald dudes, same guy.
Cannot tell the difference. Yeah,
I mean,
and we always talk about family, so it's a
So I don't. That annoys me, and it's like, yeah. So that's my big issue with how everything connects together. But aside from that one issue, that Aurra Singh dropping the Force sensitive storyline about how she was like trained to be Jedi and then was kidnapped by pirates and all that interesting story from that Republic comics and the comics of that era. Despite that, everything else kind of fits really well, and I am glad that they did use some of the characters that either were not necessarily characters that were introduced in those comics, but characters that were made bigger by those comics after being introduced in either Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace.
There you go. What I don't think the rest of us have read those comics, at least not to the same extent that you have. So let's I'm gonna focus in on the second part of Joel's question, which is the Clone Wars serving as kind of a soft reboot of the prequels. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Agree, because I think the Clone Wars was often, I don't think this is necessarily intentional on George's part, but I think maybe some other creators were intentionally doing this, like taking some of the things that did not hit home with the prequels, taking some of the things that George was trying to say with the prequels, but just didn't connect with the audience. And the Clone Wars had a chance to things like, let's face it, like the whole, the voices, I think it's voices episode, and like all the midi-chlorian talk, like that season 6 is like full of like, oh, well, here's things. We're going to go talk to Chancellor Valorum, who's retired now. He's going to explain what actually happened with Sifo Dyas. Like, it's good stuff, but it's actually backtracking and trying to figure out basically what is like confusing elements of the prequels. And I think you could kind of say as like maybe kind of a soft reboot in a way of like going back to the beginning and kind of like telling the story from a different perspective and adding to it. And that's why we talk about all the time about, like what could a animated series set in the sequel trilogy? What could it do for the flaws of the sequel trilogy? How could it improve on those movies? And I think, maybe reboot is not necessarily the right term for it, but I think it's definitely taking the story and running with it further and, doing stuff that I think needs to happen. I think the Clone Wars infinitely made the prequel trilogy way more interesting and way more fleshed out.
I think it's even, especially for Anakin's character, a main criticism of people that don't enjoy the prequels or didn't, was he was just kind of like a whiny guy in Attack of the Clones. He kind of just complained, and then he was just super angry in Revenge. And it's just like, oh, okay, see ya. But the whole arc and development of Anakin showing, like we only saw a glimpse of it in the prequels. We saw just kind of Obi-Wan being like, relax, you're my Padawan, and Anakin being like, I'm better. And then next thing they're fighting over lava. Like, but this, like, Clone Wars just showed the build-up of that frustration with the Order, frustration with Obi-Wan. So I think reboot, I don't think is the right word to describe what Clone Wars did for what Clone Wars did for the prequels. I would use the word hang on, I forgot the word I thought of. What was the word? I just thought of it, like it.
The word that I would use is augment. I would use the word
augment. Maybe that's not the entrenched. I don't know what I was going for. Integrated. It depthened. I don't think there is a word for what I'm trying to get. Yeah, something like that. Something like that. For the prequels, but yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, and go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I think it does that as well. I think it did it too well. That's the issue. It enhanced, maybe that's that word. It enhanced the prequels to the point where then it was too complex to exist within those movies because there wasn't enough. There was too much going on in the show that then wasn't going on in the movies.
Yeah, I do think, like, you were talking off the top of the show about how, there was a time when it was counterculture to be like, we love the prequels. I do think that the Clone Wars played a huge role in recontextualizing the show, recontextualizing the prequels. But I do think it is absolutely a sort of soft reboot, and I think the people who are making it will tell you the same thing. This is great, it gives me an opportunity to naturally plug my Substack. I've been going back and rewatching the Clone Wars and diving back into a lot of the stuff that was released with the show, a lot of the behind the scenes material and that sort of thing. And I'm prepping a piece on Ambush, which is the first ever episode of the series, right? And when you watch the behind the scenes featurette on the Blu-ray, Henry Gilroy and Dave Filoni talk openly about how they wanted to present Yoda as being much more like his Empire Strikes Back self, who's kind of impish and gives a lot of advice, and he's a little bit funny and odd while also being wise, whereas in the prequels he's so serious, and they're like, you understand why, like they understand they work for George so that they can't be too critical. They're like, so we understand why he's still like that, but we want to bring back the more Empire Strikes Back version of Yoda. And I think that's true with Anakin Skywalker as well. People may or may not know this, but Matt Lanter was not the first actor cast as Anakin Skywalker for the Clone Wars series. Originally, it was, I believe, going to be the same dude who did it for the micro series, who does a pretty good impression of what Hayden was doing in the prequels. And they didn't want that. They wanted a version of Anakin that was more had more swagger, that was more suave, that was cooler, that people could actually like. Because that was the thing about Anakin in the prequels. A lot of people found him to be so unlikable that you didn't feel it when he turned to the dark side. It didn't feel like a tragedy. And so they brought in Matt Lanter, and he said that when he auditioned for the role, that they asked him to do kind of a combination of Han Solo and Luke Skywalker.
Did you watch my reel, Dom? Are you getting that information from my reel I posted this week?
No, this is information that's been in my brain since
That's
2009.
hilarious. I literally posted that reel of him being like, so when I auditioned, they asked me to do a Han Solo. I posted that like 2 days ago. I love that. Yes.
I remember him telling that story on a podcast from his aunt's house in 2009. Wow, that's info that's like
not me. That's amazing.
The back of my head for a long ass time, and I've just been looking for an outlet. I love that we're on the same wavelength here.
Yes, that's what I was like. Wow, freaky. I love that.
This is great. It also completely shows that we don't watch each other's stuff when we're not here.
I read your Substack. Watch my damn reels, damn it.
What was the point? But like the point was they wanted Anakin to be cool. They wanted him to be somebody that you could like. And it's funny if you watch the Revenge of the Sith with the commentary that George Lucas does. He's like, yeah, I wanted to give the version of Obi-Wan and Anakin where they liked each other and they're brothers and all that stuff. And so I put this little moment in the movie, and it's like Obi-Wan and Anakin being like, I sense Count Dooku. I sense a trap. Next move, spring the trap. Like, that's it. That's all you get of them liking each other in those entire 3 movies, is that one little moment. And so I think they
are literally apart for the majority of both the movies that they are in. They're like, Attack of the Clones opens, they're together for a bit, and they're like, nope, okay, let's split up, let's go to opposite ends of the galaxy. And then the same thing happens again in Revenge of the Sith.
Yes. And so I think they were giving us a different version of Anakin. They were giving us a likable version of Anakin. They were giving us a version of Yoda that's more like the original trilogy. They were bringing the prequel characters to life in a way that was more in line with what they did about with the original trilogy, which, at the time and still to this day was the more popular version of Star Wars, was the version that resonated more with audiences. And now people go back to the prequel movies with the Clone Wars in mind, and they project the Clone Wars versions of these characters onto the prequel versions of the characters, and you get a much fuller picture.
And then you get literally Hayden Christensen coming back to play Anakin and genuinely seeming like admitting this kind of, but also like legitimately playing Anakin closer to how Matt Lanter played Anakin, which is just insane.
There you guys. There it is. Also, I appreciate everybody saying nice things about the Substack in the chat. Appreciate that. I wasn't fishing for compliments. And I will say, Hannah, I do watch your reels. I've thought the one from the point of view of a Lego shelf was very funny.
Thank you. Yes.
That was quality content.
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, just to interject with that reel specifically, that which one I'll be talking about. I had my auntie comment on that reel saying, "Put them back." I'm like, I've never been so like youngest child, like family membered, like publicly before. I literally took a screenshot and then sent it to my family group chat, being like, someone like Dad, get a hold of your sister and stop telling her to like tell me what to do. What?
Nothing better than a family member just randomly going, "Yeah, I watch your stuff." Like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, it's just like,
I've had that randomly happen over dinner. It trips me up.
Yeah, so good.
Like, Ben, we have problems with your take on the Acolyte. Let's discuss around the family dinner. All right, amazing. Good question, Joel. Let's see, how are we for time? Oh, we got loads. Okay, J Augustine 92 drops a question in the. Actually, no, Joel did a super chat. We should do the super chat because it's still related to what we're talking about. We'll get to the next comment in a second. Joel does say with the super chat, I would sort of following up on his comment and our conversation. He says, I would also consider the Clone Wars a soft reboot because of how much expanded universe lore it steamrolled over, like the Mando lore at the time.
Ooh.
True.
Okay. Hold on. So I said that I love this. This is my favorite bit. So I love how now everybody thinks that Dave Filoni needs to be the savior and take over Lucasfilm from the evil Kathleen Kennedy, when at the time when Dave Filoni first emerged on the scene, everybody thought he was as evil as they think Kathleen Kennedy is now for getting rid of all of the Mandalorian lore at the time.
Yeah. I've told this story before. I'll tell it one more time. I was at Star Wars Celebration 5 in 2010, and I was looking at a booth, looking at some stuff, and there were 2 other guys at the booth, and I overheard their conversation where one of them said, Dave Filoni. And the other one said, the man who is single-handedly ruining Star Wars. And the other guy agreed. And I'm sure I have no doubt that if those 2 guys are still engaged in Star Wars fandom, one of them is on a forum somewhere, is posting on social media somewhere going, Kathleen Kennedy, and wishing that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau would take over.
Oh yeah.
But it's funny how these things change as the time continues to move onwards, never to be stopped. Yada yada yada. All right, good question, Joel. Good comment. Okay. Let's see. J Augustine 92 got a new question here from the Discord. Says, what do y'all think of the future of Disney Plus? If Lucasfilm is scaling back, I think a lot of people will cancel subscriptions. All the other streaming services have lots of new content coming out all the time. Ben, I believe you mentioned earlier there's a report out that Disney Plus lost a whole heck of a lot of subscribers recently.
Yeah, I forget the exact number, but it was a big number, a real big number. And I mean, it's and this comes after there was this report about that Disney in particular had like finally cracked the code and actually made streaming profitable. After many years of Disney Plus being in operation, they had finally like gotten to the point where like they were making money seemingly that they weren't previously. So the whole streaming thing is still, it's an enigma. It's a crazy thing. And I don't know, I think, these things rise. Well, like there's only like, it sounds bad for like things. And, there, maybe a bunch of people just didn't want Disney Plus. I don't know. There's also only so many people in the world. I think these companies they get these streaming services and they're like, oh, well, thanks. And they'll just, the subscriber account will just keep going up and we'll just continue getting subscribers. It doesn't work like that. Like there's only like, you're gonna max out at some point unless you start streaming Disney Plus to other planets. Like it's only gonna, it's not gonna exactly work like that. So
don't say that too loudly.
Oh God.
You know exactly what I meant by that.
Yeah. But ultimately, I don't know, people, will like, honestly, I'll be quite honest. I canceled my Disney Plus. Because I'm just giving it a couple of months. Look, I'm trying to save up for next celebration, okay? Give me a break. And also, like, there's nothing to watch right now. I'm finished with Skeleton Crew. I don't really have anything to watch. I kind of do that with my streaming services. I will get a subscription or a skillfully applied for free trial to something, and I'll watch what I want to watch. And then I'll cancel it, like, because there's too many streaming services. It's a lot, guys. You can't be subscribed to everything all the time.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. There's too many. That's just it. When the streaming services started, there was one or two or three, and they weren't that expensive because the people funding it said, we just want you to increase the subscribers. And then you hit a point where people are like, okay, we actually have to make money with this. And so they start raising the prices and people go, oh, you don't actually have that much that I want to watch. I was maybe willing to pay $6 a month for, one or two shows a year. I'm not willing to pay $24 a month for one or two shows a year. You can get me for the 2 months that the show is coming out, and the rest of the time you can F right off. So the bubble is bursting. They're going to be making cheaper content. That's again why the Acolyte was canceled, or a big part of why the Acolyte was canceled. You're going to expect to see a lot more sort of documentary stuff. And when I say documentary, I don't mean like intellectual things. I mean like reality TV is about to have I think a big comeback here, and already is. And some of these streaming services are going to go away. I do genuinely believe that there's some of these ones are going to start to fade away. Canada is not a perfect one-to-one for America. We have a significantly smaller population, but we basically went through this once already, where the two biggest companies in this country that basically have a monopoly on the telecom industry, both created streaming services, and one stuck around and one didn't, because there just wasn't enough people to subscribe to both.
What are they called? What are those services?
There is still currently Crave TV, which is owned by Bell Media, and it still exists. And for all the Canadians listening, here's a name you haven't heard in a while: Show Me, which was owned by Rogers.
Yes, Show Me.
Yeah. So, but that one did not last very long because there were just not enough people. And they had bought up a whole bunch of rights to stuff. And so there was a lot of stuff that just wasn't available to stream in Canada for a very long time, because Rogers was just like, we have the rights, but you didn't want our streaming services, so you don't get it, because we're a bunch of petulant babies. And I can say that because I don't fucking work for them anymore.
Hey.
Anyways, but the point is, like, I do think some of these streaming services are going to go away, and or they're going to wind up merging together, and you'll get Disney Peacock or something, like where two of them become one.
Disney Peacock.
Yeah,
I mean, Disney Plus and Hulu are basically the same thing now. I'm seeing ads for Hulu shows on my Disney Plus homepage, and I don't know how that works, but somehow, even despite me not having Hulu, I still see Hulu shows on Disney Plus. I think basically my take on what happened was that they launched Disney Plus as this really small vault replacement service. Like, they used to have this thing called the Disney Vault, and it used to be how they sold Blu-rays, because they would tell people you can only buy it for a limited time. It's like the McRib or Mexican pizza.
Yeah. Oh, which was like, as a child, was like infuriating, because you wanted these movies and they were just not available. They were just not available. My dad still holds a grudge against the Walt Disney Company because my younger brother desperately wanted a copy of the Peter Pan movie, and it was in the vault at the time, and he couldn't find it anywhere. And so he still holds a grudge against Disney for that.
So they launched it as a new version of the vault, where you can get the whole vault now at your fingertips on demand. And that was the big thing. And it was almost like a secondary thing that they were going to have, shows like a Star Wars show, The Mandalorian, and like WandaVision and things like that on it. And so, they would expect to, get some people to subscribe to it, but it doesn't cost a lot of money to break a bunch of stuff out of the vault and make a Jeff Goldblum show and one Star Wars show and stuff.
Exactly.
And so one movie with Grace VanderWaal in it that now is not on Disney Plus. Why?
You've mentioned that twice in the past 6 months, which is a weird amount of times.
That is just one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen happen, and I will mention it every 6 months. The fact that the original Disney Plus movie, after 4 years, is not on Disney Plus anymore. Weird.
It's in the same vault as Willow.
Well, thankfully you watched it on Max or something. But anyway, the point is, and then what happened was The Mandalorian became the biggest thing ever, and they weren't expecting that. And the Marvel shows did really well, and apparently, I don't know how well the Jeff Goldblum show did, but I
don't think you can watch the Jeff Goldblum show anymore.
So
I think it's in the vault.
Well. That probably didn't do well either. But
the tax write-off vault.
I remember the reports and the things they were also saying in their own press releases over the first year to 2 years was, oh my gosh, the numbers are so much better than we thought. Whoa, this is blowing our mind. We don't know how to handle all this. It was 10 to 100 times more people subscribing than they thought. Just so many people, and they were making billions and billions of dollars from subscriptions. And they didn't think about how a lot of us, when you look at it from the user perspective, from the audience consumer perspective, we often, when there's a new streaming service and there's a cool show we want to watch on it, we'll just get it for 6 months. I've had Peacock for 6 months. I've had HBO Max for 6 months. Now Max for 6 months. Yeah, I've had Hulu for 6 months. I've tried all these things, Crunchyroll, all of them for at least 6 months to watch something at some point over the last 10 years. But have I stayed subscribed consistently to all of them? Heck no. And as Ben mentioned, Disney Plus, I haven't always been subscribed to Disney Plus consistently since it came out. So I think what happened was so many people went to go try it, and they had all those deals where you could get it for 3 years for really cheap, or 1 year for really cheap. All those people tried it, and they're cool, we watched the whole Disney Vault, we watched the new Star Wars stuff, we got our fill, we got some new Marvel stuff. We're done now. We're going to move on to something else. And then you just had that big drop off. And that would be completely fine. That would not be a problem if it was just a few Marvel shows and a few Star Wars shows and the vault's still on there. The problem is that they took all that money that they made for them the first few years and they reinvested all of it in things like the Acolyte. They spent every single cent on shows that cost the same amount as a movie, shows that cost $200-300 million to make. And that all those billions of dollars are just gone in just a handful of shows. And I think they were expecting those shows would continue to grow it or at least maintain those numbers. But that doesn't make sense from the consumer's perspective when, it's very ephemeral and or is it effervescent? I confuse those two words. But it's very temporary. how long you subscribe to a streaming service these days. Even Netflix, you don't consistently say subscribe to you. Subscribed when Stranger Things is coming back, or I forget the name of that South Korean show. But that show, Squid Game is coming back. I haven't watched it, so the next season yet, so that's why I forgot. It's been a few years. But like, so that's the problem, is all those people dropped off. They still are left with that massive budget. Now the only thing they can do is just say, you're not getting a second season. You're not getting a second season. You're not getting a second. That's all they can do. And they kind of set themselves up, and now they have to kind of fade into the kind of actual real numbers of not just the excitedness over it, and just a moment where it was the pandemic and no one was even spending money on going to movie theaters when it came out. Like, that's over now.
And that's the other part of this, is like, especially for Disney Plus, is like its timing for its launch, if it wanted that like initial growth, was just about perfect, because all of a sudden there was a time where a lot of people were stuck staying home, and you couldn't do other things other than watch TV
and play Minecraft.
And play Minecraft. So you see this exponential growth, and then all of a sudden things start opening up. People go back out into the world. They start doing other things. They're like, oh, there's other things to do other than just watch TV. And everything else is just getting more expensive. Like, that's the other part of this, is everything else is getting more expensive. People have less money to spend on these things. And the money that they do have to spend on things, they're maybe like, you know what, maybe I'd like to go out with my friends instead of spending, another year on Netflix or on Disney Plus or whatever. And so the numbers go down. And so they don't, they aren't reading the room well.
No.
And you see that and how disconnected Iger and everybody else see him compared to the first time around when
I didn't either, because I was there championing them along as they were spending that money, because me as a consumer was like, yes, take all the money that you're making and put it into Star Wars. Of course, we want to see 10 million Star Wars shows with movie budgets. That's good for us. Don't make any profits from this. So obviously, as Star Wars fans, we weren't really encouraging them to have a sustainable business model.
If they don't want to make profits, I'm fine. You know what? Yeah, keep freaking making them. I'm here. I'm fine. Yeah, you guys don't need money. You guys, they have enough. Disney has enough money. They can stand to lose money on a second season of the Acolyte.
I think a ticket to Disney World is like $1,000 now or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah,
I think the parking's $2,000. Take all that money, because we know they're profiting. That's where their money's coming from. And Disney as a company, take all that, some of those profits, and siphon it off into the Acolyte season 2. Thank you.
Yeah, have Disney World be open for 2 weeks and then go and make the Acolyte. I think you're fine.
Yeah, that's gosh, it'll cost 2 days. 2 days. I'll fund it 2 days.
Yeah, there we go. Did we answer the question? Yeah, actually, I think we did. I think we had that. Genuinely, I think we answered that question.
I wanted to say too, I am still subscribed to Disney Plus. Though it's one of the few ones that I am still subscribed to, because where else am I going to watch all of my nostalgic 2003 Disney Channel stuff? So, that's where I get like my Phil of the Future and my Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven. I mean, every Lindsay Lohan movie, like, yeah, that's I need that in my life.
Need it all.
For my midlife crisis.
Yeah, of course. All right. Good question, J. Augustine 92. Next one comes from Dr. Hugh 17. Who says, what kind of environments would you like to see in the other galaxies? I think this is building off what we talked about last week about how Peridia doesn't really look like any, or just kind of looks like, or we've talked about in previous weeks about Peridia just kind of looks like another planet and not anything special from another galaxy. I was recently visiting the Half-Life games, which had me thinking about the kinds of locations that could exist beyond the main Star Wars galaxy that we know and love. Perhaps something abstract like Mortis, or interdimensional like the World Between Worlds. The concept art for Revenge of the Sith is also rich with unique location designs. We only got a very brief glimpse into the other galaxies in Ahsoka, so I'm up for anything that could push the technical boundaries of Star Wars even further. What would we like to see? I want to see like an upside down world. That's what I want to see. Everything's upside down.
Well, funny you say that. Like, it feels like I don't want to say production design because that's a specific thing. Just the general imagination of Star Wars creators creating it. New setup.
Yo. Wow.
He just dropped his mic. For those listening.
Literally.
But like the general imagination that Star Wars creators put into the creation of like not just like this is a forest planet, this is a ice planet, this is a desert planet. Like that was taken to, I think, its peak level with Revenge of the Sith. Because like you look at like Felucia, it's just so alien. I don't know if they've ever gone that far with a Star Wars planet since then, or even before then. And you know, and then top it off, you've got like Cato and Modia, like both like amazing planets, like this city, like this bridge city, and like some of the bridges are like upside down cities and stuff like that. Like it's crazy. Exactly. So like it's
already happened.
Feels like now, and like I don't want to like put blanket criticism like they all suck. Like no, there's been some great production design in recent Star Wars stuff, but nothing to that level. And I feel like it's been kind of like, well, let's do desert planet, like barring like Jakku, Tatooine, that kind of like comparisons. That's a whole nother story, but just like the general, just like we've had a lot of forest planets, a lot of things. Like come up with something. I know, just coming up with something from scratch, like something that's never seen anybody has ever seen before, is hard. It's very hard. It's not an easy thing to do. But I wish they would be just like, go weird. Do the Void. Do Abafar. Like, that's just a weird concept. And it's crazy. I know not everybody loved it, but I did.
I loved that.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why that was so funny. I love that. Yeah, well, I totally agree with you, Ben, because I think, you know, if you're trying to think of different ecosystems, you do run out quite quickly, and you can kind of count them on one hand of like how many options you got. But I think you can just take those few ecosystems and make them weird. Like have a desert planet, but instead of sand, like it's all pebbles and all the pebbles are blue. Like you could just take a simple idea and like just change one color, and it's like, oh, this is new. Like I think it'll still have that effect. Like have a forest, but it's mainly vines, and you have to like swing everywhere. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can have the same ecosystem, just add a weird element to it. Yeah.
Well, it's like one of the original concepts for Jakku was, it's this junkyard desert planet, but also part of it's an ocean. Like it's kind of a mixture of desert and ocean. I was like, that's so cool. Why didn't you do that?
I mean, my hope remains that Ahsoka season 2 ends with Thrawn going to Dathomir. Live action Dathomir. Give me some hope there. Give me some hope there.
That'll be cool. That'll be awesome.
But I do think the design for Star Wars, like they have not branched out much. Like to me, I'm thinking of thinking back on the shows. What are the best like new designs? And like honestly, Skeleton Crew, the moon with the planet like looming in the background, that was really cool. Otherwise, everything else is kind of the same. And
Book of Boba Fett Ringworld, pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty good too.
Pabu was an interesting kind of landscape for an ocean place.
Yeah. But they seem to, I don't know. I don't know if they're not hiring the right designers, or they're not giving the designers the right amount of time or the right freedom. Yeah. Because again, you go back to the Clone Wars, and they would come up with these new planets every week that would all kind of look different and kind of look interesting. And like I said, I've got Ambush in my mind, but like the coral world of Ambush, like that is kind of like it's different, it's unique, and that was Clone Wars at its beginning, when they were still figuring everything out. They hadn't even perfected a lot of the techniques that they would go on to perfect later on in that show. So yeah, interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very.
All right. What do we got here? Good question, Dr. Q. Good question. Jesse B will close things out with the Ask the SWU segment here. It says, good evening, SWU. I was recently talking with my daughter about why I love Star Wars. She finally made the decision to watch all the movies and wanted my input on why I love it and what order to watch it in. I gave her the release order, which is the correct order. But my question for you is based off of her question to me. Why do you love Star Wars? For me, it's because of the original trilogy is telling a literary everyman story in a glorious sci-fi format, and it captures each character model perfectly. Hope it's not too hard a question this time, and this time only one question for me. As always, may the Force be with you. Why do you love Star Wars? I don't actually. I just been pretending for the last.
we just pay you to be here.
Yeah. I actually, really more of like a, Star Trek. Yeah, Star Trek guy. Yeah. No. Why do you love Star Wars? It is. I hate it when people ask me this question because it's like I don't know how to boil it down into like the one sentence. And I know that's not what Jesse's asking, and I know this is a podcast where we can take as much time as we want. But when people ask me like, "Oh, why do you like it so much?" I'm like, I just do. It's cool. Wookiees. I don't have a good answer. I have a sentence.
Wookiees were so close to the top of there. Wow.
Chewbacca is such a big part of the original trilogy. God, Wookiees are part of it. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, for sure. What a Wookiee. So I can boil it down into one sentence. Star Wars has the most dynamic sandbox. That's my sentence. That's why I think that's why I think I gravitated towards it as a kid and an adolescent more than so many other competing things, was because I felt like you had the greatest range for robust storytelling within Star Wars and robust imagination, because a lot of my childhood was also about like imagining my own Star Wars stories. And so I think just the idea that you could have just any planet and it could have any culture and any species of aliens, and they could be speaking any language, and there could be any technology. It like has pretty much everything except time travel, and then that started to be worked in kind of sort of too. So I just think it has the most robust and dynamic sandbox, and because it was heralded by one person for so long, its continuity of just kind of what was allowed in the universe, stayed kind of more consistent than a lot of other things, especially things that had been around for as long as Star Wars had by the time that I came along.
Yeah, the thing, I'll try to be as concise as possible, I'm not saying this is why I think Star Wars is cool. I always think about like, why is Star Wars so universal? Why is it that Star Wars has become arguably one of the most popular and beloved things in human history, like period. Like everyone seems to like know it, like it, or love it like we do. And it is like, because I think ultimately what it boils down to is like Star Wars kind of cheats at like getting all the cool stuff. Like, I'm not just talking about the cool elements of like the Force, lightsabers, blasters, spaceships, like all the stuff that everyone loves. It's the mythology of it. I think Star Wars, you take A New Hope of just like, oh, Han Solo is this cowboy, Obi-Wan is this wizard dude, and Luke is this farm boy, there's a princess, all these mythological. That's what George Lucas did, was like take you all of these things he loved, which is what most people love, and just kind of put them in a, kind of make a big stew out of it, and put all these ingredients into it. And, it's not surprising that everyone loves it, because you're just taking a bunch of things from throughout history, throughout mythology, throughout storytelling, and putting them all in one thing. It's not surprising that it became so popular, and because, everyone can get something out of it. And now we're in this era where you have different versions of Star Wars. You have the Acolyte doing a murder mystery and/or doing political thriller, Skeleton Crew doing action adventure. And not all these shows are beloved because they're kind of focusing on that one element of many elements that make up Star Wars. So that's why they're like, you know, most people love Andor, but not everyone. Some people like Acolyte, some people don't. Like, I think that's ultimately kind of what we're dealing with here, is just like Star Wars being this huge, gigantic thing. It appeals to everyone. At the end of the day, it's cool. It's just cool. It's a cool thing. It's real cool. I think that's why people like it. That's why I like it. It's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good answer, Ben. Like, I think, you know, if I try to take what you said there and condense it down to the one sentence sort of answer, is that it's fun to watch, but there's more there if you want to get into it. Like, you can watch a Star Wars movie and just go, wow, wasn't that a fun time? Wasn't that really just enjoyable to watch? But if you want to dig into the deeper meanings and the themes and the character journeys and all of that stuff, it's there. You can get into it. You can dive into it. But it also has to be fun, because a lot of stuff that's really, really sort of serious and arty, it's not that much fun. It's good. Yeah, you enjoy it, but you don't come away from it going, wow, that was awesome. And a lot of stuff that you come away from going, oh, wow, that was awesome. It's not that deep. It's not that deep. But Star Wars has a depth to it. But it's also just like awesome to watch.
I think it's absolutely, I'm so thankful to be alive at the time in history that we're in right now, because we were born into the tail end of the transition from written storytelling to storytelling being depicted on a screen. And it's incredible to grow up in that period where that transition is happening, because it's similar to growing up at the time when writing was being invented, and you went from having these oral histories and oral stories that were passed down through speaking to actually putting that down on stone or papyrus, and eventually paper. And so I think what George Lucas did that underscored all of this, and the reason why, we have these opinions of it, is I think he looked at the type of storytelling that was happening and how it influenced the culture of the time when writing was starting to become a thing in civilization, and then looked out to apply that same level of interaction with culture with film and eventually and television as well, to an extent. So, going back to Homer and Western culture, like, the stories that Homer wrote and was either written down by him or people who shortly after him orally telling it wrote it down, and then it cemented it as those stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and many others. Those were the foundational written literature stories in Western literature of our culture for 2,000 years, for 2 millennia. And I feel like, George Lucas, being a student of Joseph Campbell and seeing a need for another cultural monomyth adaptation, and having that be in a film medium that was in a pop medium that would be a part of popular culture, seeing that need and then addressing that specifically with Star Wars was one of the greatest lightning in a bottle strokes of geniuses. It is not a generational genius. It is a millennium genius. I think it's something that somebody only does like once every 1,000 or so years in a continuous culture. But in different cultures at different times, but in our like Western continuous culture. So I think that just like we look at things like, the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iliad and the Odyssey as the foundational Western literature things now 2,000 years later, I think when you're looking at film, in the year 4000 Common Era, you're going to be looking at George Lucas and Star Wars in that same light. You're going to be like, this is the thing that pushed everything forward, pushed the technology, pushed its relevance in pop culture, pushed it inspiring others to come in and create similar or new things based on that. I think it's going to have that same level of impact as Homer did in literature, and I think that's why we ultimately gravitate towards it so much, because we're in a nexus of something that is happening that basically is what the pop culture is during the time of transition, when our means of telling a story has reached its third level, or I guess maybe fourth level, but when it goes from oral to written to depicted on a screen.
There it is. There it is. Hannah, you want to follow that up? Why do you love Star Wars?
Why?
Have you got an academic thesis here for us?
Yeah, hang on, let me
Could you follow the professor up here?
Yeah, wow. I think there was one thing I wanted to add. Oh yeah, I heard someone mention it earlier, of the depth.
Wookiees.
I think the depth thing.
I wanted to talk about Wookiees.
Wookiees, that's what is so good. But the depth thing with Star Wars is really, really there. And I think about the other franchises that are quite popular. I think about Harry Potter, and I think about Percy Jackson. Not that that's a massive franchise, but you know, some of the other fantasy things. Even Marvel to an extent, I want to say. And I think the merit to those fantasies and franchises is, their mythology and stories are their own, and they are fantastic, and they have a lot of merit, and those fans are fantastic. But I think there's a certain point. You can get to a point with Harry Potter, and I'm omitting saying Lord of the Rings because I think Lord of the Rings is half on this. It gets to a definitive point where I think you know everything about it now. Like, those are the 7 books. Those are the 3 books. Those are the 8 movies. Boom, you're done. And I think in the tie-in material, this whole aspect that George really just kept going, saying, let's make every possible thing related to this incorporated with media, not only just the fanatical figures, but just briefly speaking, he was making figures of characters and things that weren't in the movies, that were in later movies, because people got those figures and said, what's this thing? I wonder what this alien does. So then George has to make prequels and has to make these things because people go, there's more here. And I think that was such an interesting element of George's way of, he made you feel like you only know the beginning of it. You only know the half of it. And you felt like you were just, like, the whole original trilogy, you were just peeping into this tiny moment of this galaxy. Because George had this whole concept behind it. And I think that's what Star Wars holds. And I think in every piece of media, it does that, where it has this depth of books, comic stories, everything, planets, worlds, aliens. It's so thorough. Lord of the Rings is halfway there with its mythology, where you have the Lord of the Rings books, you have the Silmarillion, you have the other one. I think, is there another one? What's the other one called? Something else?
Appendices.
The Hobbit appendices. Yeah, there's it's got a pretty decent in-depth, like, mythology that goes back into Lord of the Rings. I think, the thought, the whole theory behind Middle Earth and concept behind that has a lot of depth. So I think Lord of the Rings can rival it, start to rival it. Not in anywhere near Star Wars, but Star Wars by all means, compared to Marvel, Harry Potter, gaming, whatever, it just clears it in terms of its depth of planets, characters, aliens, the timeline. Like, it's just so extensive. So I think that's why it's so special. And we've all spent, like, what, 10, 15, 20 plus years. I just realized you're older than me. In this galaxy. And we're still, we're still going. Like, and it is that thing. It's like, it's not just we can't move on from it. It's there's more to discover about it, which I love.
Well, I
don't think I can move on from it. I think that might be the big, that might actually be it.
Can't move on.
I don't know how.
I always say I always get a little too profound
Star Wars dumb
when there's a new Star Wars film or movie or TV show or whatever else, because I'm like, I'm going to be talking about this for the rest of my life. I'm going to be thinking about this for the rest. I'm going to be watching this thing until I die. I'm going to probably be on my deathbed watching episodes of The Mandalorian or whatever thing comes out in the next 50 years or however long I'm around. So like, it's not lost on me that like this stuff is important, and it's important.
You know
to
what
me,
I want to
and
watch
it's
my
important to a lot of us.
deathbed? The Benny episode of Bad Batch. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. I want to see how Star Wars divvies up their soup rations.
What is the last
between
thing you want to see before you finally fade away?
Dude.
What Star Wars thing? I was like, oh man. That's the question. The question to answer.
The EOP
audience.
Farting on the
EOP
screen.
farting? Yeah.
That's what I want my final vision to be. So I'll go after that.
That should be the Ask the SWU topic for next week.
Yes.
Submit your answer for if you are on your deathbed, what is the last scene from Star Wars? Yeah, we will rate it. We will rate your death preemptively. So submit it on the Discord or blue sky them at us or whatever, however you do
Making
that
more
these
work
days.
for Ben.
Yeah. Ben, save all the comments and put them in the YouTube comments. That's a viable option. And we'll go through them next week. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But I think for this week, we will begin to wrap things up.
All right. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the show. Make sure you follow us at the SWU for future programming updates and all the other great stuff that we have going on. Dad's saying he's up at 6 a.m. I thought you had just woken up. I didn't realize you had been up all night. This is I'm sorry. We kept you up all night. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting.
It's my pleasure, as always. Great fun to talk about all the things that we talked about, even though we spent a lot of time talking about things that were canceled, and that's less fun than talking about things that are coming up or happening. But I enjoyed an existential crisis at the end as we debate how we want to die. That's fun. Looking forward to being back next week to find out how you all want to die. Discussing more fun Star Wars things. And of course, if you want to read what I think about Star Wars in addition to listening to it, I don't know. It's late. If you want to read what I think about Star Wars instead of just listening to it, DominicGJones.substack.com, aka Hoth Off the Press. You can read what I'm thinking about with Star Wars and a little bit beyond Star Wars as well. You're going to be posting tomorrow morning a new article a new post about Star Wars Rebels, looking at the episode Droids in Distress, going in depth on that episode, the second episode of Star Wars Rebels. So check that out. And that's it. That's all I got. See everybody in 7 days time.
And you can follow Dominic on social media at DominicJ25. Ben, thank you so much for hosting as well.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure as always. Love the deep thoughts. Love contemplating my ultimate demise. All that stuff. It's always good. Good to be here, and I can't wait to do it all again next week. Maybe without the existential dread. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, Dominic, you're muted.
Existential dread is required.
I was gonna say, I think with Ben's clones, I think that there's already something going on.
My clones
with that.
We don't talk about that. We don't
some
talk about
exegol things in the future, and of course at Ben
existential.
Existential.
Boom.
Somehow the fun is returned. Okay.
Oh, so good.
I'm giving you a round of applause. Round of applause.
That is my outro. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll be here next week.
At the Raeside,
Yes.
RAE side. It's at the point where a lot of us now have to think, will we be here next week?
Yeah. Yay.
At the Raeside, RAE side, where you can follow Hannah on social media. And you can follow me at Seek3PO. On your way out, make sure that you subscribe or follow whatever you're watching or listening to this on. Thanks to everybody for super chatting. Thanks to our channel members. And of course, make sure you head over right now to the SWU Network Discord for more fun and games, literally. The link is in the description. And finally, of course, remember to check out our friends at the Raeside Iron Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. All the shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network will be back next week. Until then, for Hannah and Dom and Ben, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
It's a wrap.